Hi everyone, welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith. In this video, we're going to learn the 1 to 6 player expansion for Viticulture, Tuscany by Stonemaier Games. In this video, we're going to learn the Tier 2 expansions that are included. If you haven't seen it already, we have a full instructional video for Viticulture along with the other tier expansions that come with Tuscany. I'll put links to those in the description of this video. But for now, join me at the table and let's learn how to play. In the new Visitors expansion of Tier 2, new people are arriving to create new strategies for the players. To include these, simply shuffle them into the appropriate decks. The cards explain what they do, and the rulebook clarifies any questions you might have, but let me show you a couple of quick examples. When a visitor gives your opponent choices to make, like in the case of the banker, these should be chosen in wake-up order. The designer offers a then-if condition. So you only get the later portion of the card's effect if you satisfy its if requirements. In this case, that means having at least 6 structures built. The extended board expansion from Tier 2 incorporates several new components, including a new board. Now, normally when you're unlocking the expansions within a tier, you can do them in any order you choose. But in Tier 2, you should always unlock the extended board expansion before unlocking the structures expansion, which we're going to show a little bit later. The first thing we need to do is put away the old board and replace it with the new one. The new board has 2 sides, so be sure you're not using the side that has the spaces for the orange deck cards. Instead, this is the side that you want to have face up. Now place the start player grapes in the bottom right-hand corner of the wake-up chart. Each player also collects 6 star tokens in their color, returning the rest to the box. The first thing that you might notice is that there are now 4 different seasons for placing workers, and the player who wakes up the earliest gets to place their workers first in each of the 4 seasons. As before, if you place all of your workers by the end of a particular season, then you won't have any more to place in the later ones. You may notice that the opacity of the action spaces has been reversed. Here's an example from the new board versus the old board, but you still use the leftmost space in a 2-player game, both the first and second in a 3 to 4 player game, and all 3 in a 5 to 6 player game. You will notice that some of the bonuses are now available on different spaces than before, and some actions, like this one, has more than 1 bonus space. And do keep in mind the rules have been updated from the first edition of Viticulture. You may now place a worker on a space with a bonus even if you don't take advantage of the bonus. The action itself, though, must still be taken. Next, let's take a look at the new wake-up chart. At the beginning of the game, a first player is chosen randomly, who will then choose their wake-up time, placing their rooster in one of the available spaces in the first column, spring. Then in clockwise seated order, each of the other players will choose their starting time as well. However, you may never choose the first row. This requires that you have possession of the grapes, which at the start of the game are still located here. Instead of being determined randomly, for the rest of the game, you'll choose your wake-up time once you've passed out of the winter season, and we'll see how that works in just a moment. During spring, in wake-up order, players may either place a worker on a green spring action space, a private space they control, or pass to summer by sliding their rooster to the summer column of the wake-up chart and collecting any bonus there. When you pass during a season, you then must wait until all the other players have passed before placing further workers. Then, in wake-up order, players do the same thing, except instead of placing on the spring action spaces, they now place on the summer action spaces or pass into fall. In the fall, instead of automatically gaining bonus visitor cards, like you do in a regular game of Viticulture, instead you only get the bonuses listed in the wake-up space, if any. Of course, if you have a cottage, you still draw a visitor for that. The draw symbol on a gray background means that you can draw a card from any deck. The star represents influence, and we'll learn about that shortly. Age grapes means that all of your grapes on your crush pad will age, in addition to aging again at the end of the year. And passing into winter here means that you get to collect the first player grapes token. It's important to note that even if you've already used up all of your workers in a previous season, you cannot immediately pass into winter until the winter phase has started. Let's say in this example, it's the green player's turn, and they want to pass in winter. And you can do this even if you have workers left over that you haven't used. First, they move their rooster, and in this case, get to collect the green grapes. Then they retrieve all of their workers. And this means that if they had had workers somewhere in the winter season, those spaces would now be vacant, and players could put their remaining workers there, assuming that they haven't passed yet either. The green player will then age their grapes in wine following the normal rules, discard down to 7 cards in hand, collect any residual payments, and then choose their wake-up position for the coming year. Again, players may not choose row 1 unless they have the grapes. And if you did collect the grapes because you chose row 7 the turn before, you must now take row 1 when you pick your wake-up position. You would then immediately return the grapes to the wake-up chart. You will notice, for simplicity's sake, I don't have several of the other game components on the table, like the markers for the residual track, the score tokens, the decks of cards, and so on. That's for the sake of teaching new elements, but of course, when you play the game, you should use all of the required components as necessary. But now, let's take a look at some of the new actions available on this board. The star symbol represents influence. If you place a worker on the place or move influence action spaces or any other time that you would gain influence, you can place one of your 6 available star tokens from your supply on any one of the sections of the map shown here. When you first place an influence star, you gain the benefit shown, but you ignore any listed victory points. Those are gained later. Once a star is placed, note that you cannot return it to your supply. Each time you place influence, you can put it into new sections of the map or into the same sections where you've already been. And each time that you place a star, you gain the listed benefit. Once all 6 of your influence have been placed, then when you take the place or move influence action or gain influence from some other effect, you may now move stars you've already placed. Moving a star to a region does not give you that region's benefit. At the end of the game, the player with the most influence in each of the sections will get the victory points listed there. Tied players get no victory points. So neither the blue or yellow player would get the single victory point for this section, but the yellow player would gain 2 victory points for this area. Instead of a sell grapes action, the board now has a trade action. Placing a worker here allows you to exchange one of the listed options with any other one of the options. So you could lose a victory point to gain 3 lira, or discard 2 cards from your hand of any type to draw any other 2 cards. If you choose to trade away a grape token from your crush pad, it can be of any value. But if you're trading to receive a grape token, it must be a value 1 grape. The bonus space means that you can conduct a second trade. This area also means that unless selling grapes through the use of a visitor card, you will ignore the grape prices on your vineyard map. Here is a new action that allows you to get victory points. Placing a worker here lets you discard a wine token from your cellar to gain the listed victory points based on the wine token type that was removed. The value of the wine token itself makes no difference. Going on the bonus space here allows you to also place or move an influence token. With this expansion, the game concludes at the end of a year in which a player has scored at least 25 points by the end of winter. Once all players have passed in winter, then add in victory points from the influence map and any other unlocked endgame bonuses like the patronage expansion. The player with the most points wins with lira as a tiebreaker. You'll notice the victory point track goes all the way up to 40, but there is no longer a victory point maximum. With the special workers Tier 2 expansion, you're getting more selective over who you hire to work with you. When setting up the game, you now randomly shuffle the 11 worker cards and draw 2 to place on the table face up. If the innkeeper is drawn in a 2-player game, discard and replace it. You now find the matching worker meeples for the 2 drawn types and then return the rest of the worker meeples and their cards to the box. At most, you will only ever have 2 of the special worker types in any one game. Now, when training a worker, either through an action or some other means, you have the option to pay an additional lira to gain an available special worker instead of a regular one. Now, no matter what the cost to train the worker initially, even if it was discounted, you must then still pay an additional 1 lira to gain a special worker. Each player may train no more than 1 of each type of special worker, and for that reason, when setting up the game, you can remove workers of colors that are not being used by the players. Your special workers count against your limit of 6 workers total, so if you train 2 special workers, along with your grande worker, you can then at most have 3 regular workers. Each special worker has a unique optional ability, and if that ability resolves when it is placed, or when another worker is placed with it, resolve that first before anything else. Otherwise, special workers are used just like regular workers, and when you train them, you must still wait until the following year to use them. Each special worker type has a card detailing all of its abilities, so we won't go through all 11 of them, but I'll show you a couple just for fun. When you place the Traveler, it may be put on any open action space from a previous season, even spaces that are not normally available due to the player count, and then you get to take that action. So let's say it's fall in a 2-player game and the blue player has a Traveler. Now the player could place that Traveler on one of the fall action spaces or go back to summer and even place here on this second space that would not normally be available in a 2-player game. When placing the Mafioso, if you put it on a non-bonus action space, then after taking that action, you may take it again, as long as you respect the rule limitations. For example, we know you cannot harvest the same field twice during a single year. So going here would allow the Mafioso to harvest a field, but it couldn't be the same field that was already harvested by this worker. It would then get to harvest another field because there is no bonus on this space, but again, that would need to be a field that had not already been harvested this year. The Tier 2 Structures expansion adds new building options to your vineyard. So now each player should add the construction mat extension to their vineyard. And then the board should be flipped over to show the side with space for the structure deck, which is this group of orange-backed cards that should be shuffled and placed here. If you look around the board, you'll find several different ways to draw these structure cards, which then get added to your hand and count against your hand limit. To play one of these new structures from your hand, you'll need to take an action that lets you build a structure. Then pay the cost of the structure found in the top left-hand corner. And then place it on an open space on your structure mat or on an empty field that you own. When you build a structure, you automatically gain 1 victory point, which you're reminded of right here. If you want to remove a structure you previously built, place a worker on this action space here and then discard one of your chosen structures. You do not lose any victory points for doing this. There are 3 types of structures. One with a private action space for you to put up to 1 worker per year during any season. Grande workers may not be placed in an already occupied structure. Most of these actions will have a cost to place the worker there and a benefit. For example, this says that you gain 2 victory points, but you'll need to discard 1 wine token of any type. You cannot gain the benefit if you're not also able to pay the cost. Some structures are enhancements. You don't need to place a worker there, they just have an ongoing effect once they're built. For example, with the workshop, now when you build structures, they cost you 1 lira less than normal. And finally, residual structures give you an additional bonus at the end of each year. These are similar to the residuals gained by filling wine orders, except they give you resources other than money. The silo, for example, lets you draw a vine card. It's important to note that the statue gives you a victory point at the end of each year, not during it. So it can't trigger the last year of the game by giving a player their 25th point. And those are the Tier 2 expansions. In a separate video, we'll cover the Tier 3 expansions. But if you have any questions at all about anything you saw here, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.